Long ago, in the heart of Ala Igbo, where the forests whispered ancient secrets and the drums echoed across peaceful villages, there lived a young girl named Adaeze. She had no father, she had no mother, yet her gentle heart would one day change her destiny forever. This is the story of the orphan who became a queen. Many generations ago, there was a beautiful Igbo village surrounded by tall palm trees, flowing streams, and rich farmlands. Every morning, the villagers woke to the sound of roosters crowing, as women swept their compounds and men prepared for the farms. Among them lived a little girl named Adaeze. Although she was only 12 years old, sadness had already filled her young heart. Her parents had died from a terrible illness years before, leaving her completely alone. After their deaths, Adaeze moved into the home of her father's elder brother and his wife. At first, they welcomed her, but as the years passed, everything changed. Adaeze's aunt, Nwakaego, believed the orphan brought nothing but extra work. Every morning before sunrise, Adaeze fetched water from the stream, gathered firewood from the forest, cooked meals, washed clothes, and cleaned the compound. While her cousins laughed and played with other children, Adaeze worked until her hands became rough and sore. Yet she never complained. Instead, she greeted everyone with a smile. Even those who insulted her received kindness in return. The elders often whispered, "That child carries peace in her heart." But Nwakaego only became more jealous. One evening she declared, "You will never become anything in this village." Adaeze quietly lowered her head. She said nothing. Adaeze never argued. She never answered harsh words with harsh words. Instead, she carried on with her chores quietly, believing that one day God would wipe away her tears. Every evening, after finishing all her work, she would sit alone beneath the old Nanukwu tree at the edge of the village. There, she would whisper gentle prayers, asking only for strength to face another day. She never prayed for riches. She never wished for revenge. She simply prayed for peace. Little did Adaeze know, someone had been watching her every single day. An old woman whom no one in the village seemed to notice. The mysterious old woman had watched Adaeze carry water. She had watched her gather firewood. She had watched her wash clothes. And she had watched her greet everyone with a smile, even those who treated her badly. The old woman smiled softly. "This child has a heart unlike many adults," she whispered. Tomorrow, she decided, would be the day she tested Adaeze's kindness. The following afternoon, after gathering firewood from the forest, Adaeze began the long walk home. The sun was setting, and the narrow forest path was quiet. As she walked, she noticed an old woman sitting beneath a large tree. The old woman looked tired and weak. She leaned on her walking stick, breathing heavily, as if she had walked a very long distance. No one else was around. Most villagers who passed simply ignored her and continued on their way. But Adaeze stopped. Her heart would not allow her to leave an elderly woman alone. She gently placed her bundle of firewood on the ground and walked toward the stranger. With a kind smile, she bowed respectfully. "Good evening, Mama," she said softly. "Are you all right?" The old woman slowly lifted her head and smiled. For the first time in many years, someone had stopped to ask if she was okay. The old woman smiled gently at Adaeze. "My child," she said in a weak voice, "I have been walking since sunrise. My legs can no longer carry me." She looked at the heavy bundle of firewood lying on the ground. "Would you help an old woman reach the stream? I am very thirsty." Adaeze did not hesitate. She knew that if she returned home late, her aunt would be angry, but she also knew that leaving an elderly woman alone would be wrong. Without saying a word, she smiled and nodded. "Come, Mama," Adaeze replied softly. "I will help you." Adaeze carefully lifted the old woman's arm. They walked slowly together toward a small stream hidden among the trees. Every few steps, the old woman stopped to catch her breath. When they finally reached the stream, Adaeze knelt beside the clear, flowing water. She carefully filled a small calabash with fresh water and offered it to the old woman with both hands. The old woman drank slowly, then smiled with gratitude. "My child," she said softly, "may your kindness never be forgotten." Adaeze simply smiled. She expected nothing in return. To her, helping someone in need was the right thing to do. Adaeze waited patiently. She never complained. She never rushed the old woman. To Adaeze, every elder deserved respect. As the old woman rested, she quietly asked, "My child, have you anything to eat?" Adaeze reached into the small cloth bag tied around her waist. Inside was the only food she had saved for herself after a long day's work. Without thinking twice, she placed it into the old woman's hands. She would rather go hungry than watch an elderly woman suffer. The old woman's eyes filled with quiet amazement. This child had given away everything she had. "Please eat, Mama," she said. "I can always eat another day." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. No one had shown her such kindness in many years. The old woman accepted the food with trembling hands. She ate slowly, thanking Adaeze after every bite. When she had finished, she looked into Adaeze's eyes and smiled. "My child," she said quietly, "people may judge you by your clothes or your poverty, but the heavens see your heart." A gentle breeze swept through the forest. The leaves of the ancient trees rustled, though there was no wind just moments before. Adaeze felt something strange. It was as if the whole forest had suddenly become silent. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. "My child," she said, "you have given kindness when you had very little yourself." Adaeze smiled gently. "I only did what anyone should do, Mama." The old woman shook her head. "No. Many people would have walked away. Many people would have ignored me." The tired old woman no longer looked weak. Her eyes shone with wisdom, and her voice became powerful. "Adaeze, your heart has been tested, and you have passed." Adaeze looked at her in surprise. She did not understand who this woman truly was. The old woman reached into a small cloth bag she carried and brought out a beautiful wooden necklace. "Adaeze," she said softly, "this is not a gift for your beauty or your wealth. It is a gift for your heart." She placed the necklace gently in Adaeze's hands. "Never allow the cruelty of others to change the kindness inside you." Adaeze held the necklace carefully. "But Mama, I have done nothing special," she replied. The old woman smiled. "That is exactly why you are special." She raised her hand and blessed Adaeze. "May your kindness open doors that no one can close. May your name be remembered with honor." A warm breeze passed through the trees. When Adaeze looked up again, the old woman was gone. Only the sound of birds singing remained. Adaeze looked around in amazement. She knew she had just experienced something she would never forget. By the time Adaeze reached the village, the sun had already disappeared behind the hills. She carried her empty basket and walked quietly toward her uncle's compound. Her heart was peaceful because she knew she had helped someone in need. But as she entered the compound, Nwakego was waiting for her. Her aunt looked at the empty basket and then at the late hour. "Where have you been?" Nwakego shouted. "Do you think this house runs by itself?" Adaeze lowered her head. She wanted to explain everything that happened in the forest, but she knew her aunt would not believe her. "I am sorry, Mama," she whispered. Nwakego shook her head angrily. "Sorry will not finish your work." She turned away, leaving Adaeze standing alone in the darkness. But unknown to Nwakego, the kindness Adaeze showed that day had already started changing her destiny. The next morning, the sound of royal drums filled the village. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone stopped what they were doing and gathered near the village square. A royal messenger arrived wearing beautiful traditional clothing and carrying the symbol of the kingdom. "I bring a message from the palace," he announced. The king is searching for a young woman with a kind heart, wisdom, and good character. The villagers looked at each other in surprise. Many young women began dreaming of palace life. Some admired their expensive clothes. Others spoke proudly about their families and wealth. But Adaeze stood quietly at the back of the crowd. She had no fine clothes. She had no riches. She only carried the kindness that had always lived in her heart. The royal messenger continued, "The palace will invite chosen young women to meet the royal family." As the crowd celebrated, Adaeze never imagined that her name would soon be called. A few days later, the royal messenger returned to the village. This time, he carried a list of names chosen to visit the palace. The whole village gathered again. When Nwakaego heard the news, her eyes lit up with excitement. She quickly dressed her daughters in the finest clothes they owned. "Remember," she told them, "the palace must see how important our family is." Her daughters wore expensive jewelry and walked proudly through the village. They laughed and talked about the beautiful life they imagined waiting for them at the palace. Adaeze watched quietly. She wore the same simple dress she always wore. She did not have gold. She did not have expensive decorations. Nwakaego looked at her and laughed. "Do you really think someone like you belongs in a palace?" Adaeze lowered her eyes and said nothing. She remembered the old woman's words. "Never allow the cruelty of others to change the kindness inside you." The day finally arrived. The chosen young women entered the palace one by one, hoping to impress the king. Some spoke about their families. Some showed off their beautiful clothes and expensive jewelry. They wanted everyone to see what they had. Then Adaeze stepped forward. She stood quietly before the king with respect. The king looked at her simple dress and asked, "Young girl, what do you bring before the palace?" Adaeze bowed her head. "Your Majesty, I do not have riches or expensive gifts. But I bring honesty, respect, and a heart that wishes to help others." The palace became silent. At that moment, an elderly woman entered the hall. Everyone recognized her as the mysterious woman from the forest. She walked toward the king and smiled. "I know this child," she said. "She gave me kindness when she had nothing to give." The king looked at Adaeze with surprise. The test was never about wealth. It was about the heart. The king stood from his throne and looked at Adaeze with admiration. "Many people have wealth," the king said. "Many people have beautiful clothes and precious things. But a kind heart is the greatest treasure a person can have." The palace elders nodded in agreement. The old woman smiled because she knew Adaeze's kindness had finally been recognized. The king offered Adaeze a place in the palace, where she would be cared for, educated, and treated with the respect she deserved. For the first time in many years, Adaeze felt that she truly belonged somewhere. Tears filled her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of happiness. She remembered all the difficult days she had endured, the lonely nights, the heavy work, the harsh words, and she realized that every act of kindness had led her to this moment. Months passed, and the village began to hear stories about Adaeze. The little orphan girl who was once ignored had grown into someone everyone respected. One day, Adaeze returned to her village wearing beautiful royal clothing, but her heart remained the same. She did not return with pride. She returned with kindness. The villagers gathered around in amazement. "Is that really Adaeze?" they whispered. The same girl who used to carry water, gather firewood, and work quietly in the compound had changed, but the greatest surprise was waiting for Nwakaego. Her aunt stood frozen as she saw Adaeze step out of the royal carriage. She remembered all the harsh words she had spoken, all the times she had made Adaeze feel worthless. Adaeze looked at her aunt and smiled. She did not come back for revenge. She came back to show that a good heart never loses its value. The entire village watched as Nwakaego slowly walked toward Adaeze. Her eyes were filled with shame. "My child," she said quietly, "I treated you badly when you needed love the most. I saw you as a burden, but I was wrong. For the first time, Nwakaego lowered her pride. She apologized. The villagers waited to see what Adaeze would do. Would she turn away? Would she remind her aunt of all the pain she caused? But Adaeze remembered the kindness she had always carried in her heart. She stepped forward and held Nwakaego's hands. "I forgive you," Adaeze said. "Pain should not create more pain." Everyone around them became silent. The villagers realized that Adaeze's greatest treasure was not her royal life. It was the beautiful heart that brought her there. From that day forward, Adaeze became known throughout the land as a woman with a heart of gold. She helped the poor, she cared for the forgotten, and she always remembered where she came from. The elders would tell children, never look down on someone because of their situation. A kind heart can open doors that money cannot, and that is the story of Adaeze, the orphan girl whose kindness became her greatest crown.